evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. It very nearly didn't happen tonight. I've had a day of chaotic arrangements. I almost didn't make it back in time, but I've just about made it. So here we are. Not quite as smart as usual, but we're able to go ahead. I'll just give you a little warning. You can learn from my mistake today. I was in Campbelltown today and I needed to catch a bus to Glasgow. Now in Edinburgh, next to a bus stop, they have a little screen that tells you which buses are going to stop at that bus stop. Well, they have a similar sort of thing in Campbelltown, only it tells you which buses are going to stop at that bus stop and the one on the other side of the road as well. So anyways, that was be 3 hours late, but I've just about made it back. Right, so what's our little bit of family party news? First of all, there's a meeting in Dundee tonight. We've missed that already, unfortunately. So hope that went well. Tomorrow evening, we have a meeting in Hamilton. We've been to Hamilton before, but this is a new venue, the Alona Hotel, which is quite swanky. I've had a cup of coffee there before. So yeah, the Alona Hotel. We've got a function room there. So ask for us. You'll find us tucked away in a function room. And Leo Lanahan, our Glasgow area chairman, will be there. I'll be there for that as well. Then Thursday evening, we have a meeting in Stirling, in again 7 o'clock in the Crossed Peels pub. The Crossed Peels. That's just in the bar, so you'll see us gathered around a table with some family party literature sitting there. You'll see me. Michael Willis, our chairman, will be there as well. So that's Stirling tomorrow night. Right, as always, I'll just remind you of our conference coming up on the 13th of November. Tickets are selling very nicely, especially for the dinner in the evening. I mean, that really is, filling up very nicely. So if you're keen to come to the dinner, I would urge you to book that sooner rather than later. It's pinned to the top of our Facebook page, Twitter, and I think it's on the YouTube community things as well. So I encourage you to book up for our conference. We'll be announcing some of the speakers before too long. All sorts of interesting people will be addressing the conference and leading some of the activities there. Right, moving on to this evening's guest. Well, I'm not going to be interviewing this evening's guest. Michael is going to be. So Michael can introduce you. Well, let's say hello to Michael first. Right, Michael.
Hello, Richard.
Good to have you. Michael joining us from Stirling. And Michael, I will leave you to it. You can introduce our guest. And then towards the end, I'll pop up again. And I'll be in charge of the comments. So do put in comments. I'll bring some of them up for Michael to have a look at as well during the chat. But
yeah, thanks, Richard. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to welcome a very special guest. It's Lynda Rose, and she's the Chief Executive Officer for Voice for Justice UK. Voice for Justice UK. And you must take a look at their website. It's a very sophisticated organization. And Lynda's got a very interesting background, trained in the law, and then moved to the religious life, was one of the first women ordained as an Anglican deacon and then priest. But she's turning her attentions now to this this executive post of leading Voice for Justice UK. So I'm sure the viewers will be very interested in what she has to say, and I believe there's a lot to learn from some of the intellectual rigor and thinking behind the work of this group.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah, welcome, Lynda. And you're based in Oxford, the intellectual centre of England, or it was until St Andrews took over, I believe, nominated the top university for this year.
That was 4 point in Oxford, I think. Well done, St Andrews.
Yes, well done. I've said to the viewers who may watch this live or may watch this later, what an interesting profile you have, on the website. And one of the first things that attracted me to it was an article entitled "Protecting Lobsters, but Not the Unborn." Can you tell me about that particular paper, which I believe you wrote?
I did, yes. Well, it's very interesting because a few weeks ago there was a big fuss in the press because it had come to the attention that lobsters were being boiled alive, and people were saying this is cruel. So a group of animal welfare rights people began to agitate to have a clause added to the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill that would safeguard the physical well-being and feelings of all creatures, basically, with a backbone, and that they wanted this to be extended to cover shellfish, and I'm going to get this wrong, cephalopod mollusks, includes things like lobsters. So, and Boris Johnson said, "What a splendid idea!" I think Carrie Johnson is actually behind this rather a lot. Anyway, they had this added to the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill. Now, it struck me when I read that I mean, you know, I applaud people who are speaking out to defend any creatures from pain or you know, suffering of any sort. But the interesting thing is that they don't apply the same sort of criteria to the unborn. Now, we know that, you know, the heartbeat is, you can hear it from 6 weeks, the brain is forming. From 12 weeks, we now know too that a fetus will feel pain, it will react to pain. So it is sentient, it has a backbone. Why are we not extending the same protection to the unborn in the womb? You know, we are saying we're not going to boil lobsters anymore because it's cruel. And yet we happily, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sound frivolous here, but, you know, the unborn are aborted without any kind of pain relief. And they feel pain. They must feel absolute agony with the methods that are used. Well, it feels like rank hypocrisy to, on the one hand, say we're going to defend lobsters and shellfish and all animals that are sentient, that feel pain, but we are not going to do the same for our own species. So that was the background to the article, and I just thought it was such a gift that you know, they're calling for protection for lobsters, but not for the unborn. And one of our team came up with this wonderful image of a lobster, which he put against a fetus, an unborn child in the
Yeah.
womb. And it was just, I thought it was incredibly powerful. But it's unspeakable that we get so worked up about animal rights, and yet we act with such wanton cruelty towards an unborn child.
Yes. I mean, it was a well crafted article, and excellent in terms of exposing these contradictions in our society, and I wonder, is that sort of typical of the work you do, and would you describe your work as primarily campaigning? And yeah, perhaps you could talk us through the main platforms of the work of Voice for Justice, Lynda.
Well, we work to defend Christian belief and Christian freedoms in our society. And so we, I mean, our strapline is a voice for the voiceless and speaking truth to power. And what we actually do is we research everything very, very carefully. So a lot of work goes into the background of all these things. And we produce a lot of reports, and we are working in a whole range of areas to defend, I suppose, I would say traditional values, but it's more than that. It is Christian values, Christian belief, Christian freedoms, and protection for those who cannot speak out for themselves, as with the unborn, as with people, you know, coming to the end of life, as with children in education. So we are working very hard to defend those who cannot defend themselves, but with a very strong research-based approach. So we never just say something like, oh, it's terrible, you know, we don't approve of this, it's against the Bible or something like that. We actually look at all the data and we assimilate these very carefully researched reports, and we then make a case for the other side.
Okay, how big is your sort of research team? And I'm very interested in how you, as a chief executive, sort of manage this team and get the best out of them and keep them sort of focused. Because you've got. I mean, I know Patricia Morgan. I mean, wonderful writer and researcher. I see she's on your team, so you've got some sort of big hitters. But I saw a lot of young faces there. Yeah, describe the team to us.
Well, I think we're very, very blessed in that I don't think I've ever come across before in any organization people who are so committed and so enthusiastic for what we do. I mean, it really, to me, it's very humbling, and it's a real joy because they all care passionately, and we have a lot of people volunteer because these are issues that are so close to their hearts. And I think that more and more in society today, people are feeling that nobody listens to them and that they can't say anything. They can't make their voice heard. And our team is very much working so that they can make their voices heard. And that's why we do the research and everything. So I think, as a team, we are committed to empowering Joe Public, to giving them the tools and the arguments that they need when they feel that something is wrong, but they don't know what to say because they're going to get rubbished out in the public arena. But we are aiming to give them the tools to say, no, actually, your point is really valid, and it's valid because, and you can use these arguments. And yeah, I mean,
how do you arm Joe Public, these individuals who are unable to articulate their Christian views and their Christian standpoint? Because, I mean, we're in the middle of a big publication of new literature, and we're still great believers is that you've got to get literature out. We might be in the digital age, but literature in someone's hand makes such a difference. Is that what you do? Do you widely disseminate via the printed page your scholarly papers and your ability to give a voice for the voiceless?
I think we do it on two levels. So every week we'll be sort of commenting on something. So it goes out to a very quite a big database of people who we know they take on board the arguments, and we equip them, and we often say, please write to your MP, and God bless them, they do write to their MPs, which is wonderful. But we do regularly publish reports and books that come out of conferences that we hold. And I mean, we've just had one come out about 5 weeks ago, called Missing Millions, How Abortion is Harming Us All. So that's looking at the abortion debate, and it is packed full of data and facts that people can use if they want to go and talk to their MP, or even talk to a local church or whatever, or write a letter to the paper. We want to mobilize people. So that's what we're trying to energize them to do. So yes, we publish books, publish reports, and a lot of our reports we send out to all members of Parliament and peers, because again, we're working to influence public policy. And I think Missing Millions, again, it was produced with that in mind, because of course abortion is coming back into Parliament big time. You know, there's been such a fuss over telemedicine abortion in the last 18 months. And there is a push behind that to demedicalize and decriminalize abortion completely. And we are trying to arm people with a counter argument. And in fact, one of our big planks at the moment is that when the time limit for abortion was fixed at 24 weeks, that was specifically done to match the rates of viability. That's when a child is capable of being born and having independent existence of the mother. Now, if you look at medical progress today, the fetus is, well, I should say the baby is regularly surviving from 22 weeks, 21 weeks, and even 20 weeks. Now, there's a gap there, isn't there? If the yardstick before for viability was 24 weeks, and we are now having babies surviving from 20 weeks, we think that's a very strong argument, not for decriminalizing abortion, but actually bringing the time limit down to match that. So we're actually campaigning for reduction of the time limit for 18 weeks. And I think we're having impact because it's not just us, but I think nationally, more and more people are beginning to think, hang on a minute, it's not right to say that you can abort a baby up to birth when they can live and they're healthy. And this is, I think a lot of people are quite scandalized by that.
Can I take you back to the missing millions? So this is a detailed book or booklet.
A small book.
Okay, a small book, which is being widely disseminated, and this is arming, the voiceless. This is arming them with the facts, and I did notice there was quite a bit there on the impact the abortion mentality, its unceasing expansion, is having on demographics, not just in this country, but across Europe and wider afield, and of course many individuals really just aren't aware of that these lost millions are having a catastrophic effect on having future mothers to produce children. And can you tell me a bit about some of your major findings in missing millions?
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is a global problem, and we are having, it's a demographic problem. For any society to survive, they have to have a reproduction rate of 2.1 children per woman, at least, to survive. Now, because of abortion, that is actually being radically affected in this country. At the moment, we're between 1.6, 1.7. Italy, I believe it's 1.3. Spain, I think it's 1.4. Russia has had a terrible problem, and at the moment they are 1.5. China, I would have to check this. I believe overall it's 1.2. But last year in certain areas of China, it went down to 0.98. What this means is that societies cannot survive. So we are killing off the human race, literally. Our societies, they will die out unless we start allowing these children that we are aborting to be born.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a worrying problem.
Yes, and yet we get parties like the Green Party talking about sustainable populations, and they would probably jump up and down with glee with those statistics. But the demographics, once you're in that spiral, in that downward spiral, there's no way to turn it around. I gather Hungary are doing quite well, aren't they, in terms of supporting the family and promoting the family as an institution that should be cherished and not interfered with by the state.
But you see, Russia and China have been working terribly hard to reverse this trend. And of course, Russia really, if we go back to the Russian Revolution, they pretty well started this because they were pushing abortion as a means of contraception, and it was a little bit too effective. And Putin, over the last 15 years, has been working terribly hard to strengthen the family and to entice couples to have more children. And he has actually been pushing this up very well. It's 1.5 at the moment, so there's still a long way to go. But I think at one point it went down to something like 1.1. So there's real sort of terror that if they don't do something, that's the end of Russia. And China, a few years back, they were just saying with population is far too big. So they brought in, if you remember, the one-child policy. And they had a huge problem with abortions and sex-selective abortion, so that on top of the one-child policy, which was bad enough, they're actually having too many boys born, which completely destabilized the population. And they have been trying very, very hard in recent years they stopped the one-child policy and brought it up to 2 children. And it looks like pretty soon they're going to open it out completely. So they are working very, very hard to reverse this trend. And I know that some of the Green Party will be leaping up and down and saying, oh, the world is too overpopulated. Well, I've even heard some of the more extreme arguments put forward that actually we need to wipe out the human race so that the planet can survive. I'm sorry, but that is not... that doesn't seem to me to be a very sound or rational approach. And you just have to look at the data and look at globally. There's a wonderful website called Worldometers that has all the populations for every country in the world. And just take a look, because you will see that actually our population is not in this exploding in this way that's plundering the planet. We're actually at the opposite end. In Europe, Russia, China, especially. At the moment in Africa, they still have very healthy rates, very, very healthy rates. But, there's a lot of initiatives now going on to bring in more contraception and abortion there. And it will be disastrous if actually that happens on that continent and they too face the same problems that we're having in Europe.
Yeah. Well, it sounds as if we need to get a copy of Missing Millions, and I know it's coming up at our conference in November as a topic, but that covers nicely. I know all our viewers are strongly pro-life. That's at the heart of families, and of course, the love for children and the protection of children extends to the child in the womb. And our pathetic government, the SNP, they're starting to wake up to this demographic problem, and their only solution is to offer IVF treatment to single women who to increase the population. I mean, it's just laughable, rather than supporting families and giving them the sort of economic structure to expand. So I think we've covered that very well, and you will endear yourself, to our members who are totally committed to protecting the unborn, and we have concerns that eventually this is going to go on to abortion up until birth, that may well become the norm. Now, the second topic I wanted to cover, and I was very impressed with your material, and this is a key plank of our activities for this year, is the sex education that's going on in schools in England and in Scotland, and I really wanted to know what have you uncovered in England, and what is the way forward for parents and increasingly grandparents? What do they do about this attack on the innocence of our children?
I think I mean, you're really looking at a major problem here, Michael, because I think the plain truth is that sex education in general, actually, far from protecting children and keeping them safe, it is prematurely sexualizing them. And it is such an abuse. It destroys their innocence. And we're seeing massive problems in England, and I assume you're probably having the same in Scotland as well. Children as young as 3 are being taught that you can choose your gender, because gender actually, it doesn't have to match your biological sex. So we have seen such an explosion. There's been a 2,500% increase in children going forward for transitioning treatment. And more young adults now are trying to detransition. So this teaching is not protecting them. It is exploiting them, and it's exploiting them from an ideological perspective that has nothing to do with child welfare, which is really what makes us so angry. But even just, sort of very innocuous, these days it's become the fashion to teach children about sexual relations from a very early age. So there's a lot of sort of material in English schools with from age 5, and it's teaching them about how babies are made. So there's this teaching with graphic cartoons, all the rest of it, about daddy puts his penis into mummy, and that's how the baby is made. And just a couple of months ago, there was a freedom of information request made to police forces that came up with the fact that the most appalling levels of child-on-child sex abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where is that coming from? This isn't rocket science. It is because we are giving children too much information too young. They wouldn't normally be thinking about, and they certainly don't have the emotional or intellectual machinery to process this. And so they are behaving in an inappropriate way, but they are being encouraged to. And again, in sex education now, because there's so much of, everything has to be inclusive and diverse and tolerant. So children are being taught, and we've actually had a couple of schools at least where there's clear evidence of this. The children are being taught that some people are attracted to people of their own sex, and actually, to know if that's you, you ought to experiment before you decide on what your orientation is. And again, now, I think it's 17% of teenagers are actually identifying as non-binary. You go back a couple of decades, they didn't even know what non-binary was. They certainly didn't identify as non-binary. This is a direct result of the teaching they are being given. And our position at Voice for Justice is that you cannot teach children all about the mechanics of sex and 101 imaginative ways to have sex and divorce that from any kind of moral frame, not teaching them about relationships and how, marriage between one man and one woman is the foundation for the family that will make them happy, and that sex is the glue that binds the man and the woman together. And that if you are encouraging children to be promiscuous because you're teaching them that sex is a human right as soon as they feel ready, you are destroying their capacity to form a strong and stable relationship in years to come. And that, of course, has a knock-on effect because it undermines family. And that's what we're seeing in society today, because the family, okay, it's being massively attacked at the moment, but it's fragmenting under this weight of teaching that is being foisted onto children, which is it's exploitation and it is abuse of children.
Very passionately put, and once again, that will have such resonance with our viewers, and I mean, it is shocking. And I suppose, are you still trying to give the resources and the weapons to the voiceless, to the ordinary parents, to ordinary grandparents who see this and say, well, this isn't right, but are often shouted down, or the authority figures of teachers sort of calm them down and say, look, this is our business. We know what's best for your child. So once again, your aim then would be to mobilize and weaponize the parents and the grandparents with the research papers, the information, and this fact, it's not education, it's exploitation. It's, as you say, that they're planting these ideas into children's heads that seem incredible just a couple of years ago. But you're also doing work on other ideologies, aren't you? It's not just sexual ideologies about sexualizing children, not just about gender ideology. You're very much against the political ideologies that are being pushed in our schools.
Yes. I mean, it all sort of ties together, but we've been very concered of late. I should just mention actually here, because you're giving parents, we actually started a new website, Parent Power. And we, the aim of that was always to tell parents their rights legally under law, and to tell them exactly what children are being taught in schools, and to give them the arguments if something is happening that they don't like. And we actually do give parents advocacy help. And we will even go along with parents to schools if they find that there is a dispute that they are being ignored about. But yes.
Is that all England and Wales? Because yes. I mean, we're slightly different here in Scotland in terms of the law.
Slightly different. And we have, I mean, you're very much in our hearts. And we have seriously, we have thought a lot about how we can actually help. So we have been actually looking for people in Scotland who might actually come on the team and carry on the work in Scotland. So if anybody feels motivated and would like to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you.
As long as you don't poach too many of our best people.
Poach, no, we think we're all working.
Yes, of course.
I don't know. We don't want to poach anybody. That's not what's on.
Yeah.
But to your question, we were have been very concerned recently that Stonewall and some groups have been pushing a new policy to make the whole of the curriculum LGBT compliant. And they have there's a massive section on Stonewall, which is actually giving resources and advice on how to do that. So, physics, they give advice on how to make that LGBT compliant. Maths, they advise using LGBT examples. So it'll be, Dave and Mike want to, sorry, no, I look at your name, Michael. Dave and Mike want to take their 3 children on holiday. Can you help them sort out their finances?
But I see there's quite a bit of kickback on some of their training programs and their sort of governance conformance rubbish that they've been touting in the public sector down in England. I see quite a few of their clients are sort of dropping out of those Stonewall programs. So let's hope your work in the schools, highlights how dangerous it is. And once it's sort of built into the bricks, because I think children still have a right to be taken out of sex education in England.
No, there's an absolute right at primary level, and it's been downgraded to a right of request for secondary schools.
Okay.
So again, this is pretty much of a battleground, and it's interesting. Only a couple of days ago, I had a lady very upset contacted me because her 13-year-old daughter in a mixed class, they had been taught how to put condoms onto these plastic penises. And this poor girl was incredibly traumatized by this and hugely embarrassed. You can imagine in a mixed class with this going on. And the mother was saying, can I withdraw my child from this? Now, actually, this is a bit of a dicey area. I think there's a very strong case to be made, actually, here. But it is not an automatic right of withdrawal at all now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they seem to be sort of bolting all these doors that parents can escape through with their children. Okay, so we've looked at the unborn, and we've looked at some of the work you're doing in schools. I was very struck by the fact you push in your literature, in your research. You talk about real marriage, and and the problem. And of course, we're totally pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-life. I mean, those are probably our big clarion calls, for the defense of these institutions. But often we can be very careful in, of course, promoting real marriage between a man and a woman, but not to be seen to be criticizing all the other types of marriage. But I think you're probably, given your sort of mission and your founding documents, you're less circumspect. I mean, you want to promote real marriage between a man and a woman.
Well, again, clearly in our culture today, people same-sex attracted, there are deep relationships of love. But our position is that, from the beginnings of history, that union between a man and a woman and the family has been the building block of society, and it's given stability, and it's been a bulwark against chaos, really, and just bound societies together. And of course, that is actually laid down in the Bible right from the beginning of Genesis, and we're very Bible-based. So, this sums up our position. And in Genesis, as you remember, God creates Adam, and he sees that he's lonely, and he sees that there's no fit mate for Adam, so he's going to be stuck with being lonely, and God at this point causes Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and he takes one of his ribs, and from that rib, he creates Eve. So Eve, from the beginning, and Adam, they are a part of each other. And not just apart, but they fit together. So they are complementary. And God gives to them the gift of marriage. He tells them to look after the earth and to people it, to raise children. And he gives them the gift of union between them, the man and the woman who together form that whole, to live an exclusive and monogamous relationship with each other for their own support. And that's very important, that they are both supported in the work that they're called to do, but also for the bringing up and blessing of any children that result from that union. And that is our view of marriage. Now, of course, we have civil partnerships, we have all sorts of things, but our position is that cannot be marriage, because it has been separated from that complementarity and from the procreative element. And that is foundational. It's about what marriage is all about, because that is what brings order and stability to society. And when you try and downgrade marriage and say, oh, well, it's okay, it's all you need is love. Actually, no, that is not what marriage is about. Marriage is about faithfulness and commitment and relationship and it's exclusive. And when that happens, then the family flourishes and society flourishes. When it is undermined, you see more and more chaos taking root. And that, sadly, is what we are seeing in society today. So we're not trying to be nasty to people who want to commit to each other, but we are saying that actually that cannot be marriage. It might be a relationship and a union and a civil partnership, but it is not marriage because it doesn't fulfill any of those God-given callings. But marriage too is a gift, and it cannot. It's not on the same level.
Well, that was a lovely piece of teaching, Lynda, and that was beautifully great exposition of marriage and how different it is. And I'm sure that's and buttressing marriage, and I'm sure that's something that so few people have actually heard. And as you say, they're conned by the all you need is love, but it's much more than that. And given those biblical and those wonderful stories from Genesis, reinforcing this special nature of marriage. So, thank you very much for that exposition of the beauty of marriage. And so I want to move on to some sort of final reflections. I mean, I suppose I've got to talk about the pandemic. You've got to say something. I just noticed quite a few papers. I think you're against coercion.
I'm against coercion for any subject, anything. We are born with free will. That is a gift of God. And Voice for Justice, we stand to defend free will. So I would never support coercion on anything.
Yeah. And totally pro free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you're sort of publishing articles in that area. And I suppose I've got a few practical things to sort of finish the interview with. I mean, how do you recruit all those very bright young things in your research area? Are they sort of, do you offer them internships? Are they
well, we haven't up till now. A lot of it is just people that we meet, and they seem to have a sort of passion. So we say come and get involved. But we also have a lot of people. Contacting us and saying, can they work with us? Can they volunteer? Can they do this? And actually, because we're not very big. I think in some ways we kind of punch above our weight, and I would love for us to be able to sort of take on all these people and train them up and use them, because that's the wonderful thing, is to use people. But we are kind of limited just by size, really. But it's that combination of people that we meet and we think, yep, they look like they've got some gifts here that we can exploit. Sorry, no, we're not exploiting.
I've got a question here then. I mean, since you started up the group, I mean, what have you learned about yourself and your abilities as a chief executive, as a leader, as someone who can fulfill the purpose of this organization, who satisfies the sort of the patrons, who satisfies your various your donors and your benefactors, and presumably you have members as well, do you?
Not members as such. We have a lot of supporters.
Okay. So it's how have you grown then in this new role? A chief executive, and you're punching above your weight. So you've chalked up some successes. So how have you How have you changed, and what have you learnt about the task?
I think in some ways it's been absolutely terrifying because as I say, we're very Bible-based, very Christian. So I do believe that voice of justice, according to being by God, we were given a task. And I think, we sort of started off in a bit of a bumbling way, not quite sure where we were going. And it just grew. And there's been times when I thought, oh, there's just too much to do here. But God has been very gracious to us, and we're sort of kind of growing gradually. And I have learnt, or am learning, I think more is a way of putting it, is to spread things out and to let other people take things on. And it's a learning process, which I'm still, me personally, going through, and I think the group is going through. But when I look back, it's absolutely amazing, because we started off, we put on a conference on abortion, and it was just a one-off conference, just a few of us got together. And halfway through, we were being helped by a marketing group. It was very, very good, but they were Christian, but they was, worked in the general world. But halfway through, the director suddenly said, this isn't just a conference. This is a ministry that you're starting here. You're sort of sitting around this table, and we all looked at each other and said, oh, he's right. But we didn't really know what it meant. So we were kind of bumbling along from there. And each step of the way, the Lord has been kind of showing us, and he's brought the problems to us. And it felt like he's saying, do this, respond. And it's as we've responded, and as we keep responding, that we grow with it. But there's a huge temptation, I think, to actually do too much and to get very tired. And personally, I have, the Lord's been speaking to me a lot about rest and also about trust. And I think that's hugely important for everybody. We need to be 100% committed to what we do, but we also, it's God-given that we take rest when we need it, and we get some relaxation, because that, we don't function well without that. I don't think I'm answering you very well. But
No. No, that's a lovely answer, and I'm sure Richard is listening, because he seems to keep going, and he's sort of relentless. But I'm sure that advice applies to him, and it's that sort of drive, I suppose, that most chief executives, who keep going, and who want to deliver, is so important. So before I ask Richard to sort of come back in and see if there are any points that he wants to raise with you, Lynda, could I thank you for I've learned a lot here. I've got some things to follow up. And you presented the Voice for Justice UK, very powerfully, and there's some great stuff on the website, and you come across as a very worthy, committed chief executive, but I can see you've got that very cultured, legal sort of brain and mind, and I can see from the literature you're producing, it really is first class and well referenced, and this thing called intellectual rigor, whatever that is. And it's so good to meet up with other groups that are working in the orchards and producing this fruit. And I know we get so many setbacks, and but I think the nature of our type of individual, we are resilient, and we don't give up. We've got these obligations, and we're of course eternally grateful for what we've been given and the gifts we have, and I suppose it's up to us to deliver on that. And I know there are these very high expectations, but you came across beautifully, and I want to thank you for your time, especially if you're tired and you probably can't wait to get to bed. So I'll ask Richard to join us and see what he wants to comment on. Or Richard.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lynda. That was fascinating. Yeah, keep up the good work. It's I do see things from Voice for Justice. They are very well done. This will be very effective. Our deputy leader put a comment in. Sorry.
Can I just say, I think you guys are doing a great job with the Scottish Family Party, and I think it's really important what you're doing. And again, that's really impressive. So keep on keeping on, because it's terrific, and it's actually been great fun, talking to you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Lynda.
Yeah, our deputy leader put a comment on YouTube, and I don't know if he worked this out himself or if he found it somewhere else, but apparently with Italy's fertility rate of 1.3, Scotland's is 1.37, by the way, which is not much higher. Now, but Italy's 1.3. Apparently, if the whole world had that fertility rate, after 40 generations, there'd be less than 1,000 people on the planet. Less than 1,000 people on the entire planet. So that was a nice little statistic. So I asked him to work it out for Scotland, but I'm not sure if he's done that. I thought it was interesting to talk about same-sex marriage. So that's something we've talked about in the family party on various occasions. I would say probably a substantial majority of our supporters will probably be opposed to same-sex marriage, but not all. There's quite a few people who are not opposed to it as well. There is a policy, I think. Polly, as if it was, that's just all we'd ever get asked about all the time. But the other reason is, our priority in terms of regulating relationships, in terms of like public policy, it's what's best for children. So our policies are quite open that we think children need a mum and a dad, or if that's not possible, a mother figure and a father figure. Mm-hmm. So we're willing to have policies in that regard. Whereas in terms of what gets called marriage, we see that as not so direct a policy issue. So we've left that one to one side. Just thought I would clarify that. Here's a question for you. Now, some people take the line with abortion that, okay, there's all these sort of secondary arguments about pain and at-home abortions, sex-selective abortions, the effect on the emotional well-being of women who have abortions, the various methods used for abortions. There's all those issues that are very valid, and we can argue on those, and we do. But some people say that the problem with arguing on those issues is it means you're sort of failing to get to grips with the main issue, which is like killing a human being. People say it's a bit like, if you're opposing the Holocaust, if someone said, oh, these methods of killing the Jews are really cruel, or the train journey is really uncomfortable, or whatever. There's sort of various secondary issues. I think I'd be inclined to say, well, let's just deal with the main one first. The problem is sort of mass killing. That's the heart of the problem. So I've been thinking about that. I've been listening to people saying both. What do you think about that? What's your take?
I think that life actually begins at conception, and that all human life should be respected and should be cared for. And the fact that, that at the minute of conception is hardly bigger than a pinhead. Actually, genetically, it's all there and it just has to grow. And if you just say, well, it's so small, what's it matter? Let's get rid of it. Actually, you can apply the same, like, 2-year-old. Oh, they're so small and they're a bit of a pain in the neck. Well, let's get rid of them. Where do you draw the line? So I do take the point that actually that you're making, that life is something to be cherished and cared for. I think, a lot of the arguments that we put forward don't always touch on that so much, because society doesn't argue at that level. Society, it's all, well, it's a woman's right. It's her body. She can choose whether she wants it or not. You can't force a woman to host a parasite that she doesn't want. Now, if you're coming out with that sort of argument or meeting that sort of argument to say, but it's life, doesn't really get you very far because they won't listen. But if you can then say, okay, you're saying this, but do you know that this might hurt you? That actually the process of abortion has side effects, or it can do. It's not always quite so, simple as it's made out to be. And we've seen this very much with the stats coming through from the telemedicine abortion, that the emergency call-outs have been massive over the past year. So, it's all very well people saying it's going to make it much simpler for a woman to have an abortion at home. Why does she need to see a doctor? It's just making, sort of hurdles that she has to get through. But if you say, well, actually, a woman is liable to hemorrhage if she is at home, and who is going to look after her? It's bringing home the problems that are there. So I think that life is a gift of God, and it starts at conception, and that God has a plan for every life, and it's not ours to interfere with that life, but only to care for it. But most of the world, Richard, is not going to listen to that. So you have to have the other arguments as well as to why it's a bad idea. And one of our big things of why we picked up on the demographic problem so much was because, again, this is a problem that's actually going to affect everybody. You might say, well, I don't care. A woman has a right to decide. It's not my problem. Well, I'm sorry, but a few years down the line, it is going to be your problem when your society dies out and there's nobody there and nobody can fund the economy anymore. There's nobody there to do the work. It's going to be your problem big time. So that's why we put both arguments together.
Do you think with the secondary arguments, though, the counter arguments can be a bit better sometimes? So the argument that abortion has a negative impact on women's mental health when they have abortions. Now, there can be evidence put forward that shows some degree of trauma or distress or whatever, but there can be other evidence that comes forward and shows, well, that's not actually a major problem. And for the undecided, it can sound a bit 50-50, or they'll tend to trust the medical professionals in the end. I would say at the moment I'm veering a bit more towards the sort of absolutist line, the strongest line. Ultimately on the issue, it's like you were saying, it all comes down to, is this human life or not? And if it's human life, all the other arguments, they don't matter in a sense. It doesn't matter about whether the pain can be removed. If imagine, say, you win the argument on fetal pain, so they deliver an anaesthetic. We win the argument over at-home abortions, so they just do them at hospitals. We win the argument on sex selection, so they stop sex selection, but there's still just as many abortions. That's the way I'm thinking in any case, but we'll see. I'll just keep listening to other people's take as well.
It's an uphill battle, but let's not forget that actually there's so much contraception around these days. A woman shouldn't be getting casually pregnant like this. And actually, if we could come back to giving people more of a respect for relationships because it's going to make them happy, we wouldn't have such a problem in the first place. So again, it all ties together. And I would go back to strengthening the family and teaching kids what relationships really are and what's going to make them happy in life and bring them fulfillment.
It would be great progress if we could replace the word sex with the baby making thing. so every discussion about sex, it was called the baby making thing. I think that would be a huge step forward. But now some people in certain parts of the political spectrum, they seem to have that power to declare words redundant and to replace them. But I haven't got that, I'm afraid. But if I did, I would definitely do that. If I could just say one thing to the people watching just before we tie up. During the election campaign, I mean, we were overwhelmed with hate mail from all directions. And in the normal run of things, as leader of the Scottish Family Party, we don't get much hate mail so much in the normal run of things. But every day I will have emails and messages from people trying to persuade me of a conspiracy theory or other. Someone emailed this week saying the 9/11 attacks were really an inside job. I mean, I don't know. I try and sort of be sensitive about this. I mean, the comments during this as well, there's been a string of comments about chemtrails. For those of you that don't know what it is, it's the conspiracy theory that those white lines left behind by aeroplanes in the sky are actually some nefarious plot to be emitting chemicals that do who knows what. I mean, I sort of find it a bit sad that so many people are taken in by these things, and I don't know. It's people. I don't know. I've almost sort of embarrassed yourself by showing that you believe these things. I know it's easy to get into things on YouTube. I would just encourage everyone to try and look at both sides of the argument. Don't just assume that the mainstream's wrong about everything, and the conspiracy theory, the alternative, has always got to be right. So because it is like every day things come in. I don't know why the family party attracts this, but I just thought I'd say that in reply to some of the comments there. But that's off topic. But thank you very much, Lynda. Great to have you with us, and no doubt we'll be in touch, and we'll hear from you again at some point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Lynda. Great to meet. Thank you, Richard.
Right, good night, and hope to see some of you in, where are we, Hamilton tomorrow night, and Stirling the night after. You see details on our social media. Right. Good night.